I mean, actually, you might have a different view, but as far as I can remember, and I'm 58, I genuinely think this is possibly the worst year I can recall, certainly as an adult. The worst year ever. I mean, from the horrors of the war in Ukraine, a war in Central Europe that most of us never thought we would see again, to soaring inflation that, again, none of us really thought we would see again, the likes of what we're seeing, 10, 11% as an average, but some things way higher than that, such as energy prices. And yes, made worse by the war in Ukraine, but the truth is, inflation was still going to be big. The sad, but sadly inevitable passing of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, but in a sense the reminder what we are good at amongst all of the things that don't work. What we are good at is our military pomp, pageantry, ceremony, split-second timing. Once again, our armed forces came to the fore to make us so proud as we bid farewell to our beloved Queen. And the new King, I think he's made a crackingly good start so far. In a sense, amongst all the difficulties of this year, perhaps the new King is one of the highlights. And of course, we can't forget what's happened to energy prices. They started the year as an average, across the average household, of about £1,271 was sort of the average. By the middle of the year, by summer, before the energy price cap came in, which of course is a taxpayer-funded cap, the average was soaring to between £3,000 and £4,000 per household. And if that wasn't enough, folks, to worry about, and the price cap came in at about £2,500 per household, we've also got the ever-present risk, unbelievably in the 21st century. One of the greatest economies in the world, the fifth largest economy. We face blackouts, energy rationing. I mean, what is going on? How can this be? We've got a government that got rid of 2 prime ministers and appointed in their place a bean counter accountant who reminds me of a managing director of a subsidiary of a big, boring corporation that's on its way out. Yes, that is our current Prime Minister. We've got taxation at the highest level since the Second World War. And yet, the more we pay, the worse it seems our public services become. Can you ever remember public services being in such a state? I mean, you've only got to look at the NHS waiting lists. The longest, the highest ever, at 7 million plus officially. Unofficially, they could well be north of 10 million plus. It seems to me the more we pay, the worse things get. And it's a reminder of that old adage that government, the state, they can be very good at funding things, but generally very bad at actually managing things, at operating things. But I might be wrong. You can give us a call and tell me what I'm wrong about that, because government spending is now at the highest level ever in terms of actual pounds, shillings and pence, but also as a percentage of the size of our economy, as the size of GDP for some 50 years plus. So the more we pay, the worse things get. How does that work? Normally, the more you pay for a good, supposedly the higher quality is, the better it is, the better the service. It all seems to have gone pear-shaped. I can't explain it. Maybe you can. We've got strikes. We've got the railways on strike. Well, maybe there's nothing new there. We've got the nurses on strike. None of us can remember that. Ambulance people on strike. Border force. Passports. You name it. Everybody seems to be on strike. I'm hoping that Santa Claus didn't go on strike anywhere. Let's hope that was the case. We've got the NHS that's failing so many people that it's actually now acceptable for the first time to say that actually it's broken and it needs fundamental reform. You've even got certain brave people in the Labour Party copying the likes of David Bull and myself saying the NHS needs serious reform. So yes, there's lots going on. And don't get me started in this year on immigration, illegal immigration. 45,000 and counting. 90 brave souls decided to cancel their own Christmas to take a trip in a dinghy across the Channel. Of course, this was the year I broke the story that actually the greatest percentage of people coming across the Channel are not fleeing some war zone, fleeing persecution. No, they're fleeing another NATO country called Albania. It turns out, in reality, most of those will be foot soldiers for the drugs gangs. And that has led, of course, to an explosion of new independent shops on our high streets up and down the country. Yes, barbers that seem devoid of customers, very often devoid of smiles too, because in truth, they're actually just centres for money laundering. We've talked about this, but this is a review of the year that's just gone before we look at what lies ahead. So my big question to you literally is, who broke Britain? What does work? I mean, how has it become so broken? In my view, it's a combination of people that have broken Britain. It's the unions. It's the civil servants. But fundamentally, it's an absolute failure of leadership within politicians. The public sector has been allowed to just not perform, to go into decline, to stay at home, supposedly working from home. We were told, do you remember? We were told that would make people more productive. Well, I think there's a link. Britain isn't working, and more people are working from home. I think that's one of the big link. Productivity has absolutely gone to pot. All of this is avoidable, folks, with good management, good, robust, sometimes brave leadership. We've seen some of that elsewhere in the world, but we haven't seen much of it here in the UK. And with that, here endeth my Tuesday tirade.